He was a single father struggling to survive. She, a desperate stranger, knocking on his door in the middle of the night. He offered shelter out of kindness, never imagining she was the heiress to a billion-dollar fortune fleeing a life of lies. What begins as an act of compassion turns into a forbidden love. But her father, a powerful and ruthless man, is coming for her. Will their love survive the collision of two worlds? Jacob Miller's world smelled of grease, wet earth, and reheated coffee. At 36, every line on his face told the story of long nights and even longer days inside Miller Auto Repair, a garage groaning under the weight of 2 generations and a mountain of debt. That night, the dominant sound was the torrential Oregon rain, punishing the tin roof as if the sky wanted to vent its fury on the small town of Eagle Creek. Inside the dimly lit workshop, the only warmth came from a rusty electric heater and the small hand of Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, who held his tightly. Jacob looked at the pile of envelopes on the worn wooden workbench. They were bills, red, menacing. The mortgage was late again. The electricity bill flashed a final notice. But the one that tied his stomach in a knot was the health insurance bill, a luxury he could barely afford, but essential for the asthmatic girl who was the center of his universe. Since his wife, Sarah, had been gone for 3 years, taken by a car accident on an equally rainy road, Jacob felt he was always one step away from drowning. "Daddy, the thunder is angry again," whispered Lily, her large brown eyes reflecting the yellowish light of the only working bulb. She was in unicorn pajamas, a birthday present that was already starting to get short at the ankles. Jacob forced a smile, the kind of tired smile other parents know well. He knelt down to her level. "Don't worry, sweetie. Thunder just has a big voice. It won't come in here. We're safe in here." But he didn't feel safe. He felt the crushing weight of responsibility on his broad shoulders. He was the father, the mother, the mechanic, the cook, and the storyteller. And in all these roles, he felt he was failing. The business, inherited from his father, barely paid for itself. Modern cars required equipment he couldn't afford, and his loyal customers were, for the most part, as hard-working as he was. It was then, amidst the howling wind and a clap of thunder that shook the ground, that they heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 firm knocks on the workshop's metal door. They weren't the knocks of a customer. They were urgent, desperate. Jacob and Lily looked at each other. No one came to the workshop at this hour, much less in this storm. Jacob's protective instinct screamed. He gently placed Lily behind him, his body forming a shield. "Who is it?" he shouted, his voice louder than usual to overcome the noise of the rain. No answer, just more knocks, this time weaker, as if the strength of whoever was knocking was running out. Jacob walked slowly to the door, grabbing a heavy tire iron from the wall. His muscles were tense. He looked through the small, fogged-up peephole and saw only a drenched silhouette hunched against the wind. With his heart pounding in his chest, he unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, enough for the security chain to hold it. The cold wind rushed in, bringing with it the smell of the forest. Standing there, shivering, was a woman. Her blonde hair, darkened by the water, clung to her pale face. She wore a coat that, even soaked, looked expensive and completely out of place in the countryside. Her eyes, a frightened blue, met his. "Please," she said, her voice trembling and weak. "My car broke down on the road. My phone is dead. I have nowhere to go." Jacob assessed the scene. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like a bird with a broken wing. He saw her car, a luxury sedan that was completely out of place in the landscape, parked crookedly about 50 yards away, its hazard lights barely blinking. Everything in him screamed to shut the door, to protect his daughter, his small, fragile world. But then, from behind his leg, Lily peeked out. Her childish voice cut through the tension. "Daddy, she's cold." Jacob's gaze went from the woman to his daughter and back. In that unknown face, he didn't see a threat. He saw a reflection of his own helplessness. He saw the kind of person his wife, Sarah, would have helped without a second thought. His conscience weighed heavier than his fear. To leave someone out there in that storm, he couldn't. He wasn't the man his father raised him to be, nor the example he wanted to set for his daughter. With a heavy sigh that seemed to carry all the weariness of the world, he removed the security chain. "You can come in," he said, opening the door completely. "But just for tonight, to shelter from the rain." The woman, who introduced herself as Eliza, entered, bringing with her the cold of the night and a destiny Jacob could never have foreseen. He didn't know it, but by opening that door, he wasn't just offering shelter to a stranger. He was taking the first step toward a change that would shake the foundations of his simple, long-suffering life forever. The silence that settled after the door closed was thick, filled only by the sound of the rain and the nervous breathing of the three of them. Eliza, or rather the woman who called herself Eliza, stood near the entrance, a puddle of water forming at her feet. She hugged herself, not just from the cold, but as a gesture of self-protection. Her blue eyes, now under the light, revealed a depth of exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. Jacob, feeling the awkwardness of the situation, broke the silence. "Wait here. I'll get a towel, and, some dry clothes." He went up the small wooden staircase that led to his apartment above the workshop. Every step creaked, marking the time of a lifetime in that place. He entered the room he had once shared with Sarah and opened the wardrobe. Her scent, a soft blend of lavender and vanilla, was still there, a comforting ghost. He hesitated for a second, feeling a pang of guilt, as if he were disturbing a sanctuary. But the image of the shivering woman downstairs spurred him to action. He grabbed a pair of gray sweatpants and a college sweatshirt, clothes Sarah used to wear at home. They were simple, worn from use but warm and dry. When he came down, he found Eliza exactly where he had left her, but now Lily was by her side, offering her a small plastic dinosaur. "This is Rex. He's very brave," the little girl said, with the innocence that only children possess. A faint but genuine smile touched Eliza's lips. "Thank you. I need a brave friend right now." Jacob felt a warmth in his chest seeing the scene. He handed her the clothes and the towel. "The bathroom is right over there. You can change. It's not much, but it'll do." While Eliza changed, Jacob went to the small adjoining kitchen and started preparing something to eat. Grilled cheese sandwiches and a can of tomato soup. It was desperation food, the kind of quick meal he made when he was too tired to cook. He felt almost ashamed to offer something so simple, but it was what he had. When Eliza returned, wearing Sarah's clothes, the transformation was remarkable. The baggy sweatshirt hid her figure, making her look younger and more vulnerable. Without the designer clothes, she was just a woman with damp hair and a lost look in her eyes. She sat at the small wooden table, watching Jacob cook with a silent curiosity. "Thank you for this," she said, when he placed a plate of hot soup and a golden sandwich in front of her. "You didn't have to. No one deserves to be hungry in the rain," he replied simply, sitting down with Lily. They ate in a comfortable silence. Eliza devoured the food with a hunger that surprised her. The soup was from a can and the bread was cheap, but at that moment, it seemed like the most delicious meal she had ever had. It was real. It was warm. Made by hands calloused from work, not by a chef paid to impress. She looked at Jacob, at the gentle way he cut Lily's sandwich into smaller pieces, at the patience in his eyes. She saw the faded photo on the wall. Jacob, a beautiful woman with a radiant smile and a baby Lily in her arms. She understood the absence that hung in the air. Lily, as always, was the bridge. "Do you like to draw?" she asked Eliza, her mouth smeared with cheese. Eliza smiled. "I used to love it when I was a child. I draw flying unicorns. Daddy says they can take us anywhere." That simple phrase hit Eliza hard. Anywhere. It was all she wanted. To be anywhere but in her gilded, empty life in New York, where every step was planned, every friendship was a transaction, and every smile was for the cameras. The warmth of the food, the safe environment, and the presence of this broken but loving family began to melt the ice around her heart. She felt her eyes well up and disguised it by taking a sip of water. If this story has touched you so far, subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't miss the exciting development of the encounter that will change Jacob and Eliza's lives forever. After dinner, the storm outside showed no sign of letting up, and it became clear that fixing the car would have to wait until the morning. Jacob improvised a bed for Eliza on the old living room sofa, using sheets and blankets that smelled of being stored away. Lily, exhausted, ended up falling asleep right there, her head on Eliza's lap as she told an improvised story about a unicorn that got lost in the forest and found a new family in a car workshop. Jacob watched the scene, leaning against the doorframe. The way Eliza stroked Lily's hair, with a tenderness that seemed innate, completely disarmed him. For a moment, the house didn't feel so empty. He picked up his sleeping daughter to carry her to bed, and his fingers brushed against Eliza's. A subtle, unexpected electric current passed between them. Their eyes met for an instant, and in that silence, a question hung in the air. Who are you, really? She's an amazing girl, Eliza whispered when he returned. You're doing a great job. Jacob gave a half smile. I just try not to mess up. He sat in the worn armchair across from the sofa. Look, Eliza, I don't mean to pry, but are you safe? Are you running from someone? Her gaze became distant. The truth was on the tip of her tongue, a confession that would change everything. But fear paralyzed her. The fear that he would see her differently, that he would see her as a prize, a problem, or worse, that he wouldn't believe her. I'm running from a life that wasn't mine, she replied, her voice little more than a whisper. I just needed to breathe, and I think for the first time in years I'm able to. She looked around the simple room, at the old furniture, the tools hanging on the wall, the photo of a happy family. To her, this wasn't poverty. It was real. It was a home, and she felt a peace that no luxury penthouse in Manhattan had ever given her. The next morning dawned gray and quiet, the fury of the storm replaced by a persistent drizzle that turned the outside world into a blur of greens and browns. Jacob woke up to the smell of fresh coffee, an aroma he hadn't made himself in years. He came downstairs to find Eliza in the kitchen, her hair tied in a messy bun, wearing the same clothes as the day before. She moved with a graceful hesitation, as if afraid of breaking something. Good morning, she said with a small smile. I found the coffee. Hope you don't mind. No, of course not. Thank you, Jacob replied, surprised. The roads are still a mess. A tree fell and blocked the way out of town. No one's getting in or out today. The news should have made Eliza anxious, but to her own surprise, what she felt was a wave of relief. One more day. One more day as Eliza. I guess I'm stuck with you then, she said, trying to sound casual. While they had coffee, a world away, in a glass and steel skyscraper in Manhattan, Alistair Worthington felt no relief. He felt fury. At 65, he was a man forged in hostile takeovers and relentless discipline, traits he applied as much to his business as to his only daughter, Serafina. What do you mean, no signal? He snarled into his phone, staring at the panoramic view of New York without really seeing it. She's in a $200,000 car equipped with 3 different trackers. They've all been disabled, Mr. Worthington, replied the calm voice of his head of security on the other end of the line. The last signal was in a rural area of Oregon. We believe she removed them. She knew the protocols. Alistair clenched his fist. Of course, she knew. He had taught her to be meticulous himself. I don't pay you to tell me what I already know. I pay you to solve problems. Find her. Use every resource. I want teams on the ground yesterday, and be discreet. If my daughter's name leaks to the press associated with a disappearance, there will be consequences. He hung up, his jaw tight. For him, it wasn't about safety. It was about control. His heiress couldn't just disappear. Back in Oregon, reality was much simpler. Jacob needed to work on an old tractor engine for a neighbor, a job that required more brute force than technology. To his surprise, Eliza followed him into the workshop, holding 2 mugs of coffee. I don't want to get in the way, she said, but I can't stand being idle. Is there anything I can do? Jacob looked at her skeptically. Her hands were soft, her nails perfectly manicured. She looked like someone who had never held a screwdriver in her life. I don't think this is your kind of environment. Underestimate me at your own risk, Miller, she replied, with a challenging glint in her eye he hadn't seen before. He smiled, a genuine smile that softened his tired face. Okay, can you pass me that 12mm wrench? The 3rd one from the left. Not only did she pass him the correct wrench, but she began to organize the chaotic tool bench with a methodical efficiency that impressed him. As he struggled with a rusted bolt, she watched, analyzing the engine with intense concentration. You know, she said casually, my grandfather used to collect classic cars. He always said these old engines are like stubborn people. Sometimes you don't need more force. You need a different angle. Jacob stopped, looked at the bolt, and then at her. Following a hunch, he changed the position of the lever, applied steady, gentle pressure, and to his astonishment, the bolt gave way with a metallic groan. He stared at her, eyebrows raised. She shrugged. Just an observation. In that moment, his respect for her grew exponentially. She wasn't just a pretty face in trouble. There was a sharp mind and a quiet strength there. They worked side by side for the rest of the day. Lily played nearby, making a garage for her dinosaurs out of cardboard boxes, the soundtrack of her laughter filling the space. To any outsider looking in, they would have looked like a family. The thought scared Jacob, but it also warmed a part of his heart he thought was frozen forever. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, the atmosphere between them had changed. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by a comfortable familiarity. They sat on the small back porch, watching the stars that were finally appearing between the clouds. "Sarah, my wife, she loved nights like this," Jacob said, his voice low. It was the first time he had said her name to Eliza. "She used to say the stars remind us that even in the deepest darkness, there is light." Eliza said nothing. She just listened. He talked about how they met, about their dream of expanding the workshop, about the void she left behind. He wasn't complaining. He was sharing. He was opening a door to his past, and Eliza felt honored to be able to peek through it. "I'm so sorry," she whispered when he finished. "Me too," he admitted. "But I have Lily. She's my light." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "And you, Eliza? What's your story? Why does someone like you end up on a back road in the middle of Oregon?" Her heart raced. The lie felt like a lead ball in her throat. She wanted to tell him. She desperately wanted to be just Serafina to him, without the weight of the billions of dollars that came with the name. But if she told him, this moment, this pure, real connection, might shatter. "I was suffocating," she said, choosing a partial truth. "In a life where everything was planned, where every person I met wanted something from me. I just wanted to know what it was like to be normal, to be seen for the person I am, not for the name I carry." He nodded, understanding more than she knew. He looked at her hands, now calloused from a day's work in the shop, and gently touched them with his. His skin was rough against hers. There were no sparks, but something deeper, a sense of recognition of two lonely souls finding each other in the middle of nowhere. He felt an overwhelming urge to move closer, to close the distance between them, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to have for 3 long years. The third day dawned with a timid sun, promising to dry the last traces of the storm. With the sun came an unavoidable reality. The roads were clear. Eliza could leave. The realization hung between her and Jacob during breakfast, a white elephant in the small kitchen. Neither of them dared to broach the subject. Lily, oblivious to the tension, chattered about a dream she'd had about a flying tractor. "Well, I guess I should take a look at your car," Jacob finally said, his voice hoarser than usual. It sounded less like an offer and more like a sentence. "Of course," Eliza replied, her heart sinking. As Jacob examined the luxury sedan's engine, a task that made him feel like an archaeologist discovering a spaceship, Eliza tried to help, but her mind was miles away. Every minute that passed was a grain of sand falling through the hourglass of their remaining time. She found herself wishing the engine was destroyed, that there was a problem so complex it would force her to stay for weeks. A selfish thought that filled her with both shame and longing. In Eagle Creek, a town with only one main street, any novelty was noticed, and the black SUV with tinted windows that drove slowly past the workshop in the morning was noticed. Jacob caught a glimpse, frowned, but went back to work. They were probably lost tourists. But 20 minutes later, the same car passed again, this time more slowly. A cold, irrational sense of unease began to form in the back of his mind. Meanwhile, in a local diner, 2 men in impeccable suits were showing a photo of Serafina to the waitress. The photo was from a gala event, her in a diamond-studded dress and a forced smile. "Have you seen this woman?" one of them asked, his voice professional and cold. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Marge, looked at the photo and then out the window towards the miller's workshop. "Not in those clothes, that's for sure. But she looks like the young woman who's with Jacob. Arrived 2 nights ago during the storm." The men looked at each other. "Bingo. Thank you, ma'am. You've been a great help." Back at the workshop, Jacob closed the car's hood. "Done," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "It was just an ignition sensor that got soaked. I dried it and sealed it. It's running like new." The news hit Eliza like a ton of bricks. "Oh, that's good," she managed to say, her voice devoid of emotion. The way was clear. There were no more excuses. Seeing the disappointment on her face, Jacob took a leap. "But the roads still aren't completely safe. And I promised Lily I'd take her for a picnic by the creek today, to celebrate the end of the rain. She'd love for you to come." The invitation hung in the air, a fragile bridge extended over the abyss of her departure. The smile that spread across Eliza's face was like the sun breaking through the clouds. I'd love that.
The afternoon at the creek was magical, a fragment of perfection stolen from time. Lily ran after butterflies, her joyous shrieks echoing through the valley. Jacob and Eliza sat on a plaid blanket, sharing sandwiches and a silence that said more than 1,000 words. He watched her laugh, the sound genuine and free, and he realized something terrifying. He was falling in love with her.
With this mysterious, intelligent, and kind woman who had appeared on his doorstep like a gift from the storm. Eliza, for her part, felt like she was living someone else's dream. A simple, beautiful dream. She looked at Jacob, at the honesty in his eyes, at the strength in his hands, and knew that her heart no longer belonged to the world of balls and board meetings. It belonged to this place. It belonged to him. As they returned home late in the afternoon, the sun setting in shades of orange and purple, the sense of farewell was almost palpable. After Lily, exhausted and happy, went to bed, Jacob and Eliza stood outside on the porch. The night air was cool. "I have to leave tomorrow morning," Eliza said, breaking the silence. The words hurt to say. Jacob didn't answer for a long time. He just looked up at the dark sky. "I don't want you to go," he finally confessed, his voice thick with emotion. He turned to her, his eyes shining with a vulnerability that made her hold her breath. "In these 3 days, you brought a light back into this house, into my life. I know it's crazy. I barely know you, but it's not crazy," she interrupted, taking a step toward him. Tears glistened in her eyes. "Because I feel it too. Jacob, The words died in her throat. He raised his hand and caressed her face, his thumb gently tracing her cheek. The touch was electric, tender, and full of a longing they both felt. And then, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of overwhelming passion, but of recognition. It was a kiss that said, "I see you." It was the union of two solitudes, the collision of two hopes. For one glorious instant, under the starry Oregon sky, there were no secrets, no money, no different worlds. There was only Jacob and Eliza. The perfect moment was shattered by a brutal sound. Blinding headlights flooded the property, bathing them in a cold, white light. The sound of tires on gravel, of car doors slamming. Two black SUVs, identical to the one Jacob had seen earlier, blocked the exit of the workshop. Men in suits, with earpieces and hard expressions, got out of the vehicles and began to spread out, surrounding the house. The peace was annihilated. The real world hadn't just knocked on the door, it had kicked down the gate. The kiss that promised a new beginning was the prelude to the end. Frozen by the headlights, Jacob instinctively moved in front of Serafina, a human shield against the invasion. A tall man with an impassive face approached, stopping at a respectful but imposing distance. His eyes weren't on Jacob. They were fixed on her. "Miss Worthington, your father was extremely worried. Please, come with us." Worthington. The name echoed in Jacob's mind. Worthington of Worthington Corp. A billion-dollar empire that graced the pages of business newspapers and magazines. He looked at the woman beside him, the Eliza, who fixed engines and told stories to his daughter, and saw a complete stranger. The betrayal was a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. All the warmth, all the connection, it all felt like a sham. Before anyone could react, the door of a luxury sedan opened, and Alistair Worthington emerged from the darkness. He was exactly like in the photos. Impeccable suit, perfectly coiffed gray hair, and an air of power that seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. He ignored Jacob as if he were part of the scenery. "Serafina," he said, his voice calm but sharp as broken glass. "This little adventure of yours ends now. Get in the car." Serafina's blood ran cold. It was the same authoritarian voice that had dictated every aspect of her life. But something inside her had changed in those 3 days. The woman who had shivered at Jacob's door no longer existed. "No," she said, her voice firm, surprising herself. Jacob, hurt and furious, took a step back, distancing himself from her. So it was all a lie? A rich girl's game? Came to see how the poor people live? The pain in his voice was palpable. "No, Jacob, it was never that," she pleaded, turning to him, her eyes filled with tears. Alistair let out a dry, scornful laugh. He finally deigned to look at Jacob, a glance that sized him up and dismissed him in a second. "Listen, kid, tell me how much you want to forget this ever happened. I'm sure we can arrive at a number that will change your life. The accusation was so vile, so dirty, that Jacob's pain turned into a cold, dignified fury. He straightened up, his gaze steady. "There's no amount of money in the world that can buy my peace. And your daughter was given shelter in my home, not an invitation to lie. Now I'm asking you to leave my property." Alistair was about to give an order to his men, but Seraphina moved. She physically placed herself between the two men, the father who represented her past, and the man she wanted as her future. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the night. Everyone froze. "You will not talk to him like that. This man, whom you insult, took me in when I had nothing. He gave me food, a roof over my head, and above all, treated me with respect. Something all your money never bought, Father." She turned to Jacob, her heart in her hands. "I lied about my name, Jacob, and I'm so sorry for that. I was scared. Scared you would see me like everyone else, a walking vault. But what I feel for you and for Lily, that was never a lie. It was the only real thing in my life for a very long time." Then, she faced her father, a strength she didn't know she possessed emanating from her. "I'm not going anywhere. I love him. And if you can't accept that, then you can write me out of the will. You can disinherit me. I don't care. I choose this." She gestured to the humble workshop, to the small house, to the simple life. "I choose him." The ultimatum hung in the air, more powerful than any order Alistair had ever given. He looked at his daughter, and for the first time, he didn't see an heiress or an asset to be managed. He saw a woman, strong, determined, passionate. He looked at Jacob, who didn't back down, whose only concern seemed to be the little girl who, by now, was watching fearfully from the window. Alistair Worthington, the man who bent markets, was defeated by the one force he could never control: genuine love. With an almost imperceptible nod, he turned. "Stand down," he ordered his men. Silently, the cars were started, and as quickly as they had arrived, they disappeared into the night, leaving a profound silence behind. Jacob and Seraphina were left alone under the stars. The lie had been exposed, the truth spoken. Forgiveness didn't come with words, but with a simple gesture. He held out his hand, and she took it. A month later, the morning sun lit up Miller's workshop, but something was different. A new hydraulic lift gleamed in the center. New tools were organized on the wall. Jacob was under a car, but this time he was whistling. Seraphina, wearing grease-stained denim overalls, was jotting something down on a clipboard. She hadn't accepted a cent from her father, but she had convinced him to become an angel investor in the workshop, a legitimate business based on Jacob's talent. Lily ran outside holding a drawing. "Look, it's the three of us. And Rex." In the drawing, a male figure, a female figure, and a child smiled under a giant sun. Seraphina knelt and hugged the little girl. Jacob slid out from under the car, wiped his hands, and wrapped them both in his arms. The smell of grease, earth, and coffee was still there. But now, there was a new note in the air, the scent of home. A home that wasn't bought, but built on the foundation of a simple act of kindness on a stormy night. So, what did you think of this story? If Jacob and Seraphina's journey touched your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories, and most importantly, comment below what city you're watching from. Activate the bell to be the first to know when a new video is out, and explore our channel for more exciting stories like this. Your interaction makes all the difference.